hear me? Yeah, no? Yes? Okay, good. Something felt a little awkward there, so yeah. Which is not unusual for me. It seems like lately things are awkward often, and sometimes funny on top of it. So we're not in Ephesians this morning. I know you're all terribly disappointed. But we will, Lord willing, get back to there someday. We're going to go to Psalm 91, verse 1. And then if we may just save this last part of the sermon for another time, because I'm not sure how well I'm going to do getting through some of this. But here's what I feel like the weight of what the Spirit is saying to me seems to be landing on. It's the issue of intimacy with God. I was sharing with someone this morning that it just feels like our church has this calling to almost be like a prophet's cave. And, you know, that's a really odd way of saying it. We're not going to call ourselves that or change the name or anything, so don't worry. But even as we start the school, the plan right now is to start our school back up the week after Michael and Elisa French are here, so in October. And I just, the first class that I'm going to teach is on how to be intimate with God. And so we'll reach out to everybody who took the courses last year, both inside and outside of our church, and anybody that would like to take this course. There's no prerequisites or anything. It's not going to be any charge for it. It's just going to be part of the ministry here. And some of what I'm going to share with you today probably will look like material that's in this course. It may not be exactly this, but in fact, I'm sure it won't be. But it's got the flavor of it, or at least the idea of it. And for those of you who need a refreshing, which are most of you probably don't, but several years ago, I don't know, 5 years ago, 4 years ago now, God told me to begin to shut down the ministries of the church and prepare the elders in the church for that, so we could have a season of focusing on Him and drawing near to Him. And that ended up being about 3 years long. But as we were starting to, we started doing some of the ministries that we had going along the way, children's ministry for one. And it's interesting because just as we were, and we started planning for the school and getting the curriculum put together and started the school now and things, but it's never felt like we've been released to be out of that posture. I don't know how else to say it. And the reason is that you never are as a Christian. You're never released from pursuing intimacy with God. In fact, it's the point of the whole thing. And my wife and I have been talking about some of this stuff. Pam and I have been talking about some of this stuff for a while now. And so I think this morning is about expressing some of what I've seen and some things that I think might help you embrace this issue of being close to God and knowing Him and Him allowing Him to know you. And so I'm going to talk about some of the issues that keep people from intimacy with God. And I'm also going to give you some insights on how to start connecting with Him in a deeper way. I had an interesting week, as I'm sure many of you have too, just even experiencing some intimacy with God that I didn't expect, and in ways I didn't expect. And I believe that, honestly, we can expect more and more of that. That's just part of what is supposed to happen. Psalm 91:1 says, if I can find it, there it is. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I'm just going to say it again. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. This is one of the verses I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It's one of my favorites. I have a bunch. And it gives you a lot of insights into the way God perceives and encourages us to draw near and to rest and be found in Him. And so I'm just going to kind of refer back now for a few moments to some things I said last week. I think it was a foundational sermon last week for what I'm going to say today. I shared last week that we are in a season of transformation. not really, it's transition, but it's really transformation. Christians, every human being goes through a lot of change. We move from house to house, we move from job to job, we move from relationship to relationship, especially when you're in the dating phase of life or whatever. But, so we describe our reality a lot of the time as transitioning. But when you're a Christian, you're transformed. And you go from not just necessarily place to place or task to task, but you move from glory to glory. And when you move from glory to glory, God's intention is that there's something, a work that he's done inside of you that allows for you to know him more deeply and to express God's love more accurately to the people around you. So the point is that the kingdom is affected. So you move from faith to faith, you move from glory to glory. And it's a work of the Spirit that needs our cooperation. And so the thing that most people don't understand is that as a Christian and being a kingdom person, that doesn't always mean that you're in a church that's growing a lot, numerically. It doesn't always mean that you have a lot of abundance going on in your life, because God seems to get people in places where you're just kind of stuck with yourself and you're stuck with him. And what I mean by that is, as you're moved from glory to glory, from season to season with God, the things that occur that allow for the deeper connections with God, the intimacy to develop, is when you're in a place of obscurity. Now, the Bible often calls this hiddenness. Some people call it being in the secret or the quiet place with God. This is where he wants you to dwell. This is where he wants you to live, because it's out of that place of intimacy that everything flows. If you're not intimate, you're not fruitful. Now, I hate even saying this at this stage of my walk with God and this season in life we're in, but a lot of the body of Christ tries really hard to make things happen. We have churches where they send their staffs to conferences to learn how to market their churches better, to get people out of the seasons of woe and quiet by using our own strength and our own might to make something happen. I just call it the hype machine. And I've been in those situations, and I've noticed it's like this. It feels like, sand in your shorts or something. When you know God is calling people to an intimate walk with him, and the church is busy, keeping people busy because they want to grow and they want to see all these things happen. And people don't understand that the kingdom actually grows and is fruitful from a place of intimacy. Anything that you humanly make happen, you have to take care of yourself. You have to prop up yourself. You have to maintain yourself. And God in his grace got me to a place in life, emotionally and physically, just my age, where I don't have the emotional or physical energy or desire to do any of that anymore. If it's not authentic, I'm not interested. If God's not doing it, then, and we've talked a lot from the pulpit for the last couple of years about the coming move of God, and I do believe it's going to occur. I believe that God is moving in a variety of places in a variety of ways. It's all part of his perfect plan. And my perception is, for our little church, we're still in a season of hiddenness and obscurity, so that he can finish dealing with the things that he wants to deal with inside of us. So I'm going to go on a little further here, just trying to lay a foundation for you to understand where I'm coming from. So when God is preparing a person or a church or the church as a whole for this next move of his Spirit, they have to learn how to serve God well in obscurity, in the quiet or in the secret place. Part of that, the goal God has, is that you find your contentment in him, not in being successful as the world defines it or even as the church defines it, but he wants you to deeply know that you are loved with an everlasting love, and experience that love and know him at that level. He wants you to know his heart. He wants you to be a true reflection, an authentic reflection of who he is to the people he wants to send you. And so the type of disciple you make is directly influenced by the depth of relationship you have with God. I had a pastor of a large church a few years ago. I don't know where we ran into each other in either Home Depot or Costco, because that's where Christians go. At least that's my experience. So we seem to run into people from the past. And this pastor said to me, fascinating, he said, Steve, I've run into some of your people here and there lately that attend your church. And this has just stunned me. He said, after talking with them, I realized that my church, though it's large, I would describe it as a mile wide and a quarter-inch deep. And yours isn't like that. When I talk to your people, they seem to know God. They seem to know what's going on in the Spirit. And they have this sense that of confidence in them that allows for them to boldly communicate what they're experiencing with God. We're going to switch? Okay.
Something is echoing really bad.
This isn't surprising. Are we good? Okay. So the good news is we are obscure to people for a season, but never to God. And that's what's important. God is our refuge. He's our hiding place. And when we minister to God in a quiet and obscure place, we're hidden from him. And that's one of the things we're going to learn to do in the Prophet's Cave, or whatever we're going to call it. You know, it's the school that we do, is to learn how to connect to God and how to minister to him, what that means, among many other things. And so when we minister to God in a quiet and obscure place, we're hidden in him. That's what this is talking about. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. Dwelling means dwelling. You're hanging out with God all the time. You are with him, and you know and because you know it and you're with him, you hear him, you have a different walk than the average Christian. Because so many of us are busy, and we're going to explain why here in a minute. So when we're dedicated to God, our accomplishments are hidden in God as well. Everything that you've done for the kingdom your entire life, you will be rewarded for. It'll be tested, and you'll be rewarded for. It doesn't matter who's seen it or any of that. One of the I hate to say it this way, but I don't know how else to say it. I'm just kind of blunt. Some of my worst days were times when I was away at pastors' retreats, because it's not that they're not great guys, because they are. They're called of God. They're sons of God. They're incredibly gifted in things, and you'd think it'd be a blast, but it's just not always that. It hasn't always been that way with me, because so often the conversation starts with, "Hi, I'm so and so. Who are you?" Or if you already know each other, "Hey, how's your church going?" And in other words, how big is it? Are you guys growing really big? And this is the last thing I wanted to talk about. Even when we were 5 times this size, I didn't care about the size of it. I cared about what's going on inside people's hearts. And what we're doing as witnesses, and how are we being salt and light. There's a lot of seed planting going on right now in the kingdom. There's a lot of God is putting his finger on different aspects of our culture and exposing things. And some people become clued into that and become fearful because of their own sin and their own state with God. And you're going to have opportunities to share with people you never thought you could, because they seem so hard, And so anyway, there's just a variety of things going on. And so talking about church size is just, and it almost created like a pecking order of importance in the room after that. It was just so dumb, And then if you say something, if you're considered one of the least successful, if you say something in a meeting like that, and it was profound or whatever, people had a hard time receiving it. And it's like this, and we're going to talk a little bit about that kind of stuff, how that works in God's economy, And so oftentimes I'd be sitting in a room thinking, I have some things to share, but they really don't want to hear them, so I think I'll just stifle myself. Not that I was having a pity party, I'm just thinking, this just is going to go over not very well if I say some things, Other times I just kind of ignored that whole thing and said what I wanted to say anyway. And those of you who know me know that I would do that. So things that you do for God are He sees and He keeps account of, and it's important that you understand that. God will take you in a church like ours through times of hiddenness to reveal what's hidden in our hearts. That's not always fun. Sometimes we say things to each other that cause pain. Sometimes we say things that embarrass and shame ourselves because it's so dark or off, and we didn't know it was in there, and all of a sudden it popped out, and you're like, well, there it is. It's real awkward now socially, and sometimes you have behavior like that occurs. Doesn't matter who you are, it happens. Doesn't matter how old you are or how deep you are with God, this stuff still happens because God never stops revealing things in you that He wants to deal with you. So when there's nothing going on that's noteworthy, we need to learn to lean on God and trust Him to sustain us and to keep us content. There's a whole bunch of insights into this in Elijah's story. I don't know if we're going to get there today. If we don't, maybe the next time I'm in the pulpit, we'll do it. When we're hidden, we learn not to lean on men's approval. In fact, it doesn't mean anything to us. God delivers you from needing the approval of man. It's like all of a sudden, I really don't care what you think. I care what He thinks and how He's seeing me and how I'm walking with Him. When God sustains us as we trust Him, it allows for contentment to come. And it's the contentment the world doesn't understand, and unfortunately a lot of the church doesn't get. When we're hidden, we learn not to lean on their approval of men, but also we learn to lean on God. It's like He becomes our source for each thing that we need. When you are in silence and solitude, you learn to hear the thoughts of your heart and present them to God. This is, if you got nothing else today, I'm going to repeat this sentence. Please get this. When you are in silence and solitude, you learn to hear the thoughts of your heart and present them to God. I'm here to tell you that my personal belief is that the majority of Christians are scared to death of what's going on in their hearts and their minds. And they work really hard to shut that noise down. Unfortunately for them, it's that inner thought life that reveals the heart, that allows for you to come before the Lord and present these things to Him and cooperate with Him. And without any shame, He begins to heal you. See, it's one thing to be self-aware enough to say, yeah, I got some sin going on, and confess it and get it forgiven. It's a whole other thing to go, Lord, where is this coming from? I got to present this to you because I don't get this. Where did this start in me? Who am I offended at? Who have I judged? What vows have I made that I need to renounce and get forgiveness from and get released from? All these things are so important. And so if you have this idea that my whole walk with God is about, and when I'm in a secret or quiet place, is to be honest with my inner thoughts, my self-talk with God. If you get that, you're going to start having an intimate walk with God. That's the door you kick down. And you just go, there's nothing between you and I. You see it all anyway. We pretend like it's so deceptive, and deception by definition is a lie, and lies come from the devil. We're going to have a few more distractions today, I can guarantee you. The devil hates this message. So try really hard not to talk to each other. Try real hard to listen. Silence is very difficult for most people because they're either unaware or profoundly afraid of their own internal lives. We need to learn to trust God with our inner thought life to enter into a deeper place with God. And this is where the battle rages. Enemy throws up stop signs, shame, things like shame or just deception, where he redefines a reality in such a way that it prohibits you from progressing because you don't know how to deal with something because you don't even perceive it correctly. And so he likes to change how God really sees you in your head so that there's some level of rejection or fear so that you don't bring things to God and get these things dealt with, because these are the strongholds where he does his work from. And as you remove strongholds, you become more and more like Christ, and you become more and more bold, and you become more and more powerful. So one of the major issues is we wrestle against God because he desires us to know him intimately and to allow him to work with the things that we're scared to show him. And we remain restlessly opposed to true intimacy. When I say restlessly opposed to it, it's like, I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep myself busy. I'm going to work on this area of my life, even if God's not. Then I can feel good about myself because I can define who I am as a Christian this way. This is where you see, I call it Christian fluff. It's not real maturity. It's something else. It's deception. Is this making sense? Some of you are looking at me like I've lost my mind. All right, point number 1 is true intimacy with God means you're exposed. Well, there's a warm invitation to intimacy, isn't it? I'm going to expose myself. Boy, that's just scary, isn't it? It means you let yourself be seen for who you are and what you are. The truth is God already sees everything, but you actually start cooperating with him and acknowledging it. One key to entering into the intimacy with God is the issue of trust, obviously. When you trust, you open yourself up for God to see all that you are, and you are aware of it. And the rest of the time, he just knows everything about you in spite of you hiding yourself. So step number 1 here is just to go, you know what, I know what to do now. I want to be intimate with God. And I'm not going to ignore or pretend like my thought life doesn't exist or the things in my heart aren't real, even though they don't add up to what a godly Christian would look like. I'm going to own this stuff, and I'm going to start dealing with it, and I'm going to start talking to God about it. I'm going to ask forgiveness like I've always done. But I want to go, hey, God, when can we deal with this thing that keeps cropping up? What's your plan for this? It grieves me. I sense that it's time for us to work on this thing and get this thing dealt with. B, the purpose of intimacy is to conceive and bear fruit. All of us would like to be fruitful in life. We would like to see the lost saved, the lost delivered, people healed, all that. Cool, it's going to happen. It has happened. It is happening, and it will happen in greater amounts. But God has a level of intimacy he'd like to achieve with each one of you and in us as a church that will allow for the fruitfulness to occur, the conception to happen, and the birthing to come. Without trust, intimacy can't conceive, and the bearing of fruit will be short-circuited. When I choose not to trust, I keep God at a distance, which means I remain isolated and in my own brokenness and in my own sin issues. Number 2, we need to get a God-sized vision or view of intimacy. If you walked up to a Christian friend of yours who doesn't attend church here and said, define intimacy for me, I bet you'd get a lot of interesting answers. And I'm sure some would be biblical, but I think most people's version or understanding of intimacy is pretty hollow, pretty shallow. The language God uses in the Bible for intimacy is union. God united his spirit with ours. It's already happened, and it was done in grace. It wasn't dependent on your effort or my effort, nor can it be now. It was grace, it is grace, and it will always be grace. The presence of the Spirit in our lives through regeneration or a born-again experience that God foreordained in eternity past was a work he did. And the things I'm describing to you today is a work he does with you. And we're just saying we got to learn to cooperate instead of push him away. My little granddaughter once in a while gets ticked at me because I don't do what she wants me to do when she wants me to do it. And sometimes a little while later, after I have not done what she wanted, she'll come and hit me with a toy or push me, you know. Or a little later, she has a memory. She keeps a grudge. She holds a grudge. Like a little while later, like if Pam's holding her, I might come up. We could do something called squishing her. So Pam and I'll hug and squish her, you know. No, we don't cause her pain. We think it's fun and funny. And most days she thinks it's fun and funny. But if I have not, for instance, dropped everything I was doing and put on little kids' dance music on YouTube and sit with her and dance for a while when she asks, then I might get a nice shove right about the time I'd go do a squish. And it could be 15 or 20 minutes later. We're not too different than little year-and-a-half-old Reagan. I think some of us are just ripping mad at God in certain areas of our lives. Things that happened to us when we were little kids and teenagers, you know, we just haven't dealt with yet. And those things sit in our hearts and they fester. And when that manifests, it's time to deal with it. And this is a time to have. So I'm trying to call these times intimate time now because I'm really mad and angry and, you know, homicidal or whatever it is. I go, I better get in touch with where that came from. And he often gives me a memory. Sometimes he gives me a picture or a vision when I say, I'm going to present this to you now. I know you're watching. What are we supposed to do with this? Then he'll go, well, you need to forgive that girl for this guy for that, and, you know, this person for this, that person for that. And you need to renounce these vows that you made in your heart, and you need to do it out loud. I'm like, okay. And then, are we good? Yeah, we're good. And then all of a sudden, I feel lighter. It feels like the enemy has less access to me. I feel a little more peaceful. And oh, I must be in the secret and hidden place of the Almighty right now. This is good. I feel his peace, which is what he wants to do. He wants to restore it. He doesn't want to embarrass you or humiliate you. So God united his spirit with ours. He did it on purpose because he loves us. The changes that come from seasons of hiddenness with God include a number of things. I just have a few listed here. No more fear of man, or at least compared to how you feared him in the past. So what happens is we no longer get our self-worth based upon what people think or say about us. We actually get our self-worth from God, our peace that we have with him in knowing him. When God hides himself from us, it causes us to begin to seek him. And as we seek him, he slowly uncovers a network of lies and sin and past hurts and other issues that keep us at a distance from him. This is why he takes individuals and churches into seasons of hiddenness and obscurity to help us deal with the things that need to be dealt with so that we're an authentic expression of Christ-likeness. We actually go through a hiddenness of our own as we start looking around at the carnage of our hearts. It just causes us to stop and go, I don't want to do a bunch of ministry right now. Thank you. There's not a lot to do because we have a lot of work to do just right in here. What's amazing is eventually and hopefully we recognize that God in his loving grace enabled this whole process not to only heal us, but to reveal some of the depth of his love and his care for us. I'm not going to say a lot this morning about some of these things personally. I'm just going to share a little tiny thing because it's funny and kind of fun. It gives you an insight into the creative ways God heals us. I had an experience recently where I think I shared from the pulpit a while back, I was having some anger issues and I couldn't figure out why these things were manifesting because they were incongruent with reality and they were more imagined than real scenarios that were going on. They were just kind of in my head. And so the Lord took me through some healing processes. And one of the things that happened when I was going through the healing process is I could actually see Jesus in my heart. He let me do that. And he let me see a younger version of me, of myself. And the memories that were attached to the manifestations I was going through were actually in a little 4-year-old boy version of me. And so he's creatively showing me a picture of where my roots are for the pain that I'm in came from. And there was some forgiveness that needed to happen of things that happened back then. And anyway, it's hard not to share a bunch, so I'm kind of figuring out as I go here because I didn't intend to do this morning. Here's what happened. I was talking to the counselor, and my wife Pam was there, and we were talking about things that occurred when I was a kid that were painful, and all of a sudden, I saw Jesus holding the hand of me at 4 years old, and I'm jumping up and down in my heart, and I'm saying, I have things to share. You guys need to shut up and listen. It was hilarious. I go, excuse me, either I've lost my mind or God is about to take us through a little healing process here. And what had happened is Jesus had been healing stuff that had happened in my childhood in my heart. And they had finished a process, and the little guy wanted to share. And so I'm sharing with the counselor and Pam what I'm hearing and seeing. It's kind of like a vision. I don't know how else to explain it. I'm able to see in the spirit realm. God's enabling this. And it was all biblical and all fantastic. And it was because I didn't ignore what was happening inside of me, I decided to pursue it, that God was able to deal with this stuff, and help me out. So I'm telling you that to encourage you. And even if you don't see like I'm describing, don't count that out. And he doesn't heal everybody the same way, but don't count that out. I believe we're going to see more and more of this manifesting in these latter days, where you're going to see the supernatural manifestations and gifts of the Spirit happening as people go through these things. So what I'm talking about is some Christians describe this process as finding God, but the wise ones actually realize he was there all along. And for a bonus, you see how delighted he was to draw you close to himself and to heal you. And you start to see the incredible love God has for you. It just changes how you perceive life, how you perceive trouble, how you view the future. It deals with the issue of hope and joy in very profound ways. It's all necessary to help you live the Christian life as it's described in the scriptures. Number 3, and we're definitely only going to get halfway through this sermon today. I'm going to quit here probably. Number 3, you need to embrace the solitude. Embrace the solitude. Once you experience God in hiddenness, you are more able and prone to follow him there regularly to the secret place. You will become willing to, on your own, to explore your heart with him. But you have to trust him with the first one first. When you embrace the solitude, and by the way, I highly suggest that you make appointments with Mark and Maureen when they come. They aren't who I'm seeing, but I would. I leave those appointments for y'all. We're going about things differently. But I would highly recommend that when you have something come up, let's just have this attitude. I need to deal with this. It's time. This is time. When you embrace the solitude with God, you make it your business to search your heart for those things that are not of God, those things that are hindering your walk, those things that are keeping you. I'm going to tell you that some of the things that happen to people when they're growing up actually stifle their gifting. It's not just that it harms you relationally and it messes with your ability to trust people and God and those things, but it actually can mess around with your gifting and your calling. It's so important to let God muck around in your heart with you and to bring healing. You don't want any of that stuff in the way of you birthing healthy things in your spirit, nor do you want to have the enemy have footholds where he can intervene in certain times and places in your life to mess things up that are going on. Another thing that happens is that dealing with your own sin becomes more important than focusing on the issues of others. This is a common issue with Christians. Every busybody I've ever met in the church has a plethora of issues they've never dealt with. And they make themselves feel better by climbing on top of others and sharing their garbage instead of dealing with their own. It's horrifying. This makes you a safer father and mother in the kingdom when you're willing to go, you know what, Lord? There it is. It's not pretty. Would you help me with this? I think I'm going to stop. There's just I have more pages left than I've done. So I think we'll just do this next time we gather. So here's what I want to do. I just want to pray. This is kind of odd. I heard the words bravery prayer. And so I think that means that we need to pray and ask God to make us really brave as he takes us through seasons of dealing with stuff in our heart that we've been not wanting to face and not wanting to deal with. You okay with that? And I used to have people come there, their spouses would drag them. Back when I was a counselor, their spouses would drag them in there, and you could tell that the other spouse dragged them in there. And so in the opening prayer, we used to do the, okay, Lord, I'm willing to be willing prayer. They were there in the room with me. They got that far. And they certainly didn't want to open right up and start sharing stuff that they've been doing, they're experiencing that was painful to them or others. They just I think we probably better start with something really basic. Okay, I'm kind of willing to be willing if you're willing to work with me here, God, as long as it's not too painful. So we do a prayer like that. It got kind of funny, and I would always make it fun for them. And eventually they would trust God and maybe me at some level where they could just, start to share. And then God would do extraordinary things. Extraordinary things. I had a lady show up one time. She was ready to commit suicide. And she knew me not really well. We were more of acquaintance level. And she walked in my office and I said, what's going on with you? Because you could feel the darkness all over her. It was just a little overwhelming. She goes, I'm going to kill myself and here's how I'm going to do it. And I'm like, oh, let's get an alternative plan. So I said, you ready for God to deal with the issues that have brought you to this place? Because that's kind of your only alternative at this point. And she's like, yeah. And I started to pray for her. And she started laughing and laughing and laughing. She laughed for 3 days. Her whole family thought she'd lost her mind. We broke off this assignment that was leading her to suicide, that stole all of her hope. And God, in 15 minutes, restored her hope, broke the stronghold, and refilled her with joy. She literally laughed for 3 days. I expect that to be normal. I really do. We're coming into a season where that kind of thing starts happening. All we have to do is go, okay, Lord, here's my heart. Oh, I've done all these things to run from you, but to prop myself up and make myself look good and to survive through this Christian life I have. But I think it's time to start dealing with some of these. It's not hard in the sense that you have to do a ton of work yourself to get yourself healed. That's not it. The issue is just, are you willing? So let's just pray. Would you stand with me? I'm just going to pray and ask God to give you bravery, a real holy boldness that comes from him to face things that are really hard. Lord Jesus, and Father in heaven, Holy Spirit, I just am stunned at how kind you are and how amazing you are and how holy and loving and how much healing anointing you carry. There's nothing too big for you. You are the definition of Almighty God. You are King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And in that state and position as God, you deem us, your people, as precious, and we're just stunned and in awe about that. And we just need to acknowledge that you are more than able to deal with whatever's in our hearts and whatever's in our minds that's between us and you. And we just decide today to ask you to make us a little braver, a little bolder, a little more confident, cause us to be able to trust you based on the truth of your word and how you truly are. And would you just please, by your mercy and grace, begin to dismantle the lies we believe that keep us from trusting you with these things. We no longer want to live Christian lives that are tainted by deception and running. We want to live Christian lives that are authentic, that are powerful, where we're healed, we're holy, we're bold, and we're able to, from a place of the secret place, from intimacy with you, minister and be fruitful in a way that is authentically and true to the kingdom in every way and form. So would you glorify yourself and manifest as Jesus came to seek and save the lost and to destroy the works of the devil. We now give you permission to do that in our lives, to take us deeper, to get to know you and to become like you. Taking a whole bunch of people with us, and we're okay if that comes later. But we want to get ourselves perfectly straight up, ready to walk with you, healed and whole. And the church said, amen. Greet one another as you see fit.